Hello and welcome back to episode 3 of After This. So, in following up from the first 2 weeks, this week we have, I guess, a similar topic, kind of feeds into the other two. This one is about, essentially, willing new realities. So, it's about creating something new where there wasn't something before. Like, instead of a natural flow of events, you've sort of consciously grabbed the world or grabbed something around you and forced it to change. I mean...
Daniel, have you read The Secret recently?
No, I've heard of The Secret, but I haven't read it. Please contextualize The Secret for me before we get started. I want to know what it is.
Oh, I'm hardly an expert, but it's just...
No, you set yourself up now.
Damn it, you called me out. No, it's just one of those bullshit, like, imagine success and success.
No, okay, that feeds into it.
Another one of those law of attraction sort of...
Yeah.
No, exactly. Alright, yeah, okay, that feeds into it. Alright, so The Secret, guys, that is the Secret to World Peace. No, it's about, like on a personal level, it's really simple, because it's like, I don't know, I have a problem in my life, I'm naturally doing these things, like I'm naturally eating too much, or I'm naturally not doing anything with myself. I can consciously stop that and go and do something else.
Yes.
I can consciously go and change my behaviour. Obviously, when you're talking about 6 billion people, it becomes infinitely more complicated because you have to get everyone to want the same change. And obviously, that's very, very difficult. So, it's a different scale, but it's more or less the same problem. So, what I wanted to go into was sort of the systems in the world that we're in at the moment, and the countries we're surrounded by, and the things we live in, and how much... are these things created by just people making decisions instead of... Like, I think what we see a lot of the time is we see these countries and we learn about them in history and all that sort of stuff, and we're like, this was just predestined. Like this is just an inevitable course. Happens. Exactly. Like, it's an inevitable course of this to this to this. Thus, it all just makes sense in order, kind of thing. But I think that's more because we make up narratives later. To make the whole thing make sense, but there's so many other things that could have happened. One of the things I liked was in early America, there was a guy called Lord Baltimore, and he tried to make America into another monarchy because they were splitting away from the UK or Great Britain. Or, I don't know if it was called the UK at the time, it probably was, but they're splitting away from Britain, and he was like, oh, yeah, no, absolutely, but we should make our own American monarchy, and I should be king.
Has that first half of that sentence ever been said without the second half of that sentence following up?
Not generally. It's not like, we should have a monarchy, and I should be a peasant.
I would like to be a peasant of that monarchy.
He looks handsome, I'll shovel his hay. I don't know. He actually had a lot of success, because a lot of Americans were used to monarchical systems, and a lot of Europe was monarchical that they just come from. So when he was like, yeah, we should do this, and he was like a pretty high up, like, aristocrat, basically, in the early America, which was very similar to Britain. And he actually had a lot of success, but ultimately he didn't have enough, and sort of like the Republican image sort of took over instead. But that leads me on to America, because America is interesting because of the fact that there's no other country at the time was anything like what America decided to be. And that was the thing, that they decided to be America.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there was a rejection of the way that the world was, where they'd come from. And they said to themselves, I don't want to be that, like, we don't want to do that, we don't want to repeat that, we hate all of that. And they'd all grown up and got obsessed and read all the things by Aristotle and Plato and all those sorts of things about the old world. And they had this intense, like, fetishization of Rome, which has been the case for, like, all of European history. And so they said, no, we're going to make a republic. Like, we're going to do that again, because it's clearly mapped out in these books and stuff that we've all read. And, yeah, so they made a republic. They made one.
I guess it's much easier to do when you've got a new space where you can just quickly kill all of the people who live there already and set up something fresh.
Yeah, definitely. When you pretend that the stuff that's there isn't actually there. Absolutely. No, the genocide of the Indians doesn't fit well into the narrative of Americans setting themselves up and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I just meant more focusing on the fact that it was a new place.
So
if
absolutely.
We wanted to set up some completely new system. Now you'd really have to be overcoming some of those.
Yeah,
you're definitely like pointing out like similar things to what you brought up earlier about like conscious decisions versus habitual decisions.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, they because the habitual decision for them would be to just go with someone like Lord Baltimore.
Yeah, continue the flow.
Yeah, and like that would have made sense. Everyone would have understood it. People were like angry at the way they were being treated from these distant kingdoms. So it was like, I think it got the right people at the right time in the right way, kind of thing, and then they were able to say this is all ridiculous, kind of thing, and then, you know, so they had enough support to declare a republic. And but then the thing is, after like during it, you had a lot of Americans who said no, we're still loyally British, and like, but then half of them also wanted to stay a monarchy, and it was a total mess. But there was enough weight of support that they are able to make America be what it is. And then obviously the French Revolution happened like 30 years later, and then a bunch of other stuff. Basically, they were the first ones to say, no, we're not going to be monarchies anymore, we're going to be a democracy. And then everyone else basically ended up following suit. But yeah, like without people strong enough and conscious enough to make those decisions and consciously do them, I mean, what would have happened, kind of thing.
Yeah, you definitely need will and someone really pushing it to have anything change from the habits and the inertia of how things have always been done.
Yeah, and I mean, would the Americans now, knowing that, go back and say, that was an unnatural change, let's go back and change it and make it monarchical again? I mean, what the hell would the world look like if there was just another monarchical America? Like, it would have just, I mean, it's sort of going that way with the intense inequality, but look, it's, you know, still...
At least they're pretending that it's not.
Like, it's still got
you
the
still
look
have
of
to
it.
vote for people, just you have to already be in that...
it's still got that caveat that voting still has to occur. Although it's not optional,
optional, so they can stop people from voting if they want. But...
Which has its own problems. I mean, then there's... I mean, I've written a few down. So the thing is, the second one is the USSR. So the USSR, I mean, again, it's like you have this peasant royal society led by the Tsars, and then things had just gotten worse and worse and worse, obviously, and then they started, you know, rationing bread when it was like this really bad winter. And you had people like Lenin who had been obsessed with people like Marx, and they'd been growing and growing, getting frustrated with the Tsars and things like that. And then when this rationing crisis happened, they basically said, no, look, fuck it. Let's just, you know, do something about it. And then they acted, and then it sort of just snowballed. And then they had a lot of sympathetic communist people who just sort of came out and started the revolution, which was the October Revolution, the original one. And then they got into a civil war, which was way less fun. And a lot of people died, which is not good. But effectively, they were just like the rest of... they were sort of just like the rest of Europe. It was just a monarchy still. Except that the Tsars... I guess it's a bit different to America, because the thing is the Tsars had been really holding themselves back.
Okay.
Like, they'd been saying, no, we don't want a lot of that new, like, constitutional stuff that you guys have in the west of Europe. We want to stay behind. But then they sort of forced it to happen. But they forced it in a way that no one else had ever done. Like, communism itself was such a new invention, and everyone was like, what the hell are you doing? Like, in the West, they were sort of slowly taking things off, sort of thing. But then things were so bad in Russia that they basically just said, nah, look, we're just going to... Regular people are just going to take over everything. And then they took over everything, and it was a mixed result. But the thing is... like, that was extremely conscious, and that was, again, only the choice. It was influenced by another guy's extremely conscious work, which was Karl Marx's work during the Industrial Revolution. Like I said last time, basically, the Industrial Revolution was a shit show for everyone who wasn't a capital owner. Then China, obviously. So China was basically... It was just this cycle of dynasties. And then eventually they got educated by the Soviets, or Mao and a bunch of other people got educated by the Soviets, and came back and sort of started the Chinese Civil War. And then it just spread, and then World War II happened, and then they kept fighting afterwards, but then eventually, obviously, the communists won. This was kind of like, we don't like the way that Soviet communism's done, so we're going to make our own version of communism, which is Chinese communism, or what Mao called it, communism with Chinese characteristics, which was his own brand of it. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, his brand of communism had all these weird little caveats and things about the way that, like, the peasantry worked and, you know, what to prioritize. But, you know, it was kind of similar. But the thing is, no one had done Chinese communism before.
Yeah.
So again, he's taking what was already a revolutionary idea and saying, I'm going to make my own version of it. And it's this repeated iteration over the last couple of 100 years primarily. It didn't really happen so much in the medieval era where everything was extremely stagnant.
I think it's probably the communication channels weren't there before.
That's
the
true.
Couple of centuries. You need to be able to communicate from this, you know, the center where the ruling is to all of the people, to have a
It's actually interesting because I remember reading something. The reason they set up federal cities, like you have like Canberra and Washington DC and things like that. The idea of them is to remove Imperial city syndrome, which apparently is very common in Europe, which is where this one city has all the people, all the education, all the power, all the everything in one place, and there's no competition for it. The idea of the federal cities is that you move the centers of power outside the commercial districts and outside all the other stuff, so that they balance each other a bit more, and everyone who lives in those cities has probably come from another part of the country,
right,
and brought their expertise from there.
Like weeding, almost like weeding out. The weak.
Cull the innocent. That's how we want to look at this. Yeah, definitely. So like the idea of it is that, like you said, communication lines.
Yeah.
So basically people are able to get this constant level of communication from everywhere, and that was just a digression about the Imperial City thing, but like you realise since the American Revolution, it's probably the earliest thing I can think of that I've learnt about that was like, whoa, this is different. And everyone thought it was going to fail. All the European countries were like, this is ridiculous. The French just supported them because they just wanted to fuck with the English.
Yeah.
Like, they just wanted to ruin their colonial holdings. Even if all it meant was then the Americans would fold back. Because the French just attacked them themselves, 10 years later or something. So it's like, no one believed it. No one thought it was going to work, whatever it was. Same with Russia. Again, no one thought it was going to work, but then suddenly what was in this is always incredible to me, right? In 1917, you have got a absolutely impoverished peasant society led by landholders and czars and things. Like, it is backwater central. Like, it is a shithole in 1917. And then in, like, the 1950s, so 30-something years later, they beat the Americans into space.
Yeah.
So you got that enormous shift in 30 years, and that is incredible to me. And Tsarist Russia was never going to do that. But the thing is, this, again, it's the conscious choice thing. It's the conscious choice to say, we're going to do things this way and focus on this and do this, and then suddenly they do these amazing things. It's just, I guess,
you need the administrative capabilities and the terms of communication, logistics, and that kind of thing, and as well as the will of the people, at least to a certain extent.
Yeah. No, that's the thing, is like they sold the dream very well to the Russian people, and it worked in a lot of ways and did in a lot of others.
Sounds like they had the secret.
Clearly that's where the book was from. Lenin's other work was The Secret, rebranded for modern release. And then so then the last one was the EU. So the EU is a weird one because you can't really compare it to anything else that's happened before. It was basically, obviously, Europe has been constantly killing themselves since Europe was Europe. So ever. And then at the end of World War II, they decided to make this the European coal and steel community, which is basically where all the countries are part of a common coal and steel sharing system, which meant that no country could suddenly and rapidly build up its military without another one knowing. Because that's what Germany did between the wars, is they secretly built their military by pretending it was private contracting. And then, so when suddenly they came out with all these tanks and planes, everyone was like, what the fuck is this kind of thing? They didn't know about it.
That's fascinating.
And because they hid it within all these corporate transactions to pretend it was just private. And then So yeah, the EU is designed so that no one could get a hold of it without anyone knowing about it, kind of thing. And then it grew from there and became a federation of states. So, or not a federation. It was trying to go to a federation, but like it's a conscious decision by these countries that are like, this is insane. We have to stop killing each other.
Yeah.
We have to set up some framework that lets us like work with each other instead of against each other.
Yeah.
And so they kind of force this framework into place. And
it needs to be everyone rather than the treaties that affected the start of World War One.
Yeah.
With everyone just being forced to jump at each other.
No,
you need
exactly.
something that's all encompassing.
Which is always funny because Germany gets the blame and it's always Austria that calls it and goes, I don't know, guys. I don't know what happened.
I was just sitting here.
I'm just innocent, guys. Don't worry about it. But like the idea was that the European Union was building towards becoming a country, like a federation, and then it stopped because everyone was getting freaked out that it was becoming a country.
Yeah.
And you had a lot of people in a lot of countries that were like, no, we don't want a super state because everyone's just thinking of the rise of Stalin again or something, and like that's all anyone ever thinks when they think of a large government entity.
So now that Brexit is happening, do you think the EU is going to collapse for everybody, or do you think Britain will just be able to leave and it'll be smooth for the rest of the EU?
I think the irony of it is that as much as it's caused other difficulties within the European Union, Brexit has been such just a shitstorm that no one wants to join that bandwagon anymore. I think there was a lot of countries that were thinking, oh yeah, we'll see how it goes. I think there was a lot of like the French supporters of Marine Le Pen and like some of the people that are for the alternative in Germany and stuff probably would have started to think, oh look, we'd be better off without the rest of the European Union dragging us down.
Yeah.
But they've sort of seen the reality of it rather than the kind of Leave campaign bullshit version of it, and it's. I think no one wants to be the next Brexit. No one does, and so it's not that everything's going to be super smooth, but I think they'll be like, we don't want to do that. Let's figure out how to make this work.
Well, I was looking at one of the things I found was a recent poll. Let me just check my notes. So they found the surveyed Europeans from, I think it was every EU country, or certainly a bunch of them, and found that the majority of people are worried that it might collapse in the next 10 to 20 years, but 90% think they'll be worse off if that happens. So that kind of reflects what you were saying there. That
the problem that happened, right, is that it was becoming, and they had this vote about creating a constitution, like in the early 2000s. I think it was the Lisbon vote or something like that. But the thing is, the idea was it was to make a constitution where you basically said all the EU countries have to obey this new EU constitution, and that was basically a step that was going to turn into a bit of a country.
Right.
And everyone got freaked out and said no.
Yeah.
And it had been moving towards that, and so it's kind of like you have this thing where it's becoming a country, moving up this slope, and then suddenly everyone gets scared, and it just sits on the hill, like halfway up it, and it's just sort of like, dangling there. And where you've got this thing where it's like economically connected, partially politically connected, but not completely. It's like this half country.
Yeah.
And it really inhibits its ability to function. And so you end up, this thing that everyone talks about where it's not democratically elected, because you vote for like parties and then they allocate people to go to the European Commission.
Right.
So it's kind of like indirect democracy kind of thing. It's not what people want, but it's like, it sort of is, but sort of not. And everyone's frustrated by that, and they think that the EU is this distant bureaucracy with no accountability. But it's more that they're accountable to the parties that you've elected kind of thing. So it's like they are, but they're not. But like if they kept building the country the way that they were going, it was going to finish, and then you'd vote in an EU election, and your country would just be like a state within a federal entity, the same way Australia is or America is. And that would have been awesome.
But I guess as long as it just doesn't fall and completely collapse, like it hasn't been that long.
Yeah.
Give it a generation, people will probably.
The thing is, like, so much of Europe is dependent on it. Like, the thing is, there's nothing advantageous for most of the continent in terms of changing. Because the thing is that you have countries like in Central and Eastern Europe, like you have like your Romanias and Polands and things like that. Economically, the amount of money that they would get and like everything they get from the West, half of Europe, is much, much greater than anything they could generate on their own, essentially. And having the common market does a lot of things. Like, it does a lot of benefits, because the thing is, to get access to the European market, which is a massive, massive market, I think it's actually bigger than the American one, you need to play by certain rules. And the thing is, by having that diktat, like, being able to dictate those rules is a really big plus, because it's like, you can't sell something that's going to kill people or whatever it is. Whereas, you know, a poorer country may not have, like, an isolated poorer country may not have that sway.
Yeah.
So the thing is, a country coming in might just say, oh, well, we just won't sell it to you at all.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to impose these rules on us, we'll just skip you and
Yeah.
sell to everyone else. Whereas if they do it all together, everyone wants into the European market because it's enormous.
Collective
It's
bargaining.
like, it's worth the cost of, exactly, collective bargaining, yeah. It's worth the cost of doing it. So that's the point, kind of, that's like one of the big benefits of it, and it wouldn't go well for anyone if the whole thing fell apart, but I don't think it
Do you
will.
think even if the more of the richer countries are being completely selfish, if one of them leaves, do you think there's... I guess I'm not saying
thing-
this very
I guess-
well, but I guess the fear that led to Brexit was that all these poorer nations are dragging
down the rich ones,
and
yeah.
this wave of immigrants that, you know...
Yeah, look, the thing is,
Gerbs.
I think immigration, the thing is, the immigration fears that I read about aren't so much to do with employment, it's cultural change. Like, people are scared that there's going to be a massive cultural shift.
Yeah.
Like, people are scared that suddenly, like, you know, everything's going to look and sound different, and everyone's going to be doing different things, and it's not going to be the country I remember, kind of thing. It's a culture fear, culture shock, and I think the implication of that is we're going to end up with more radicalized, hardline rules and regulations and you know, religious punishments and pro-Islam stuff and all this stuff. Like, it's going to go down this slope, but, like, as long as you have the country's constitution, it's not really a major risk, because there's certain laws you just can't put in. You can't make it legal to kill someone because they've, you know, disobeyed some religious law.
Right.
Because the constitution says you can't.
Yeah.
So that law is illegal.
But again, like you're saying, it's all constructs. So, like,
Yeah.
it's just it's not even something written down on one piece of paper, I imagine.
Yeah.
It's just complete construct, and if everyone was just like, oh, yeah, nah,
Yeah.
we're just going to do it anyway,
Yeah.
there's no, like, greater power to stop that.
Yeah, no, I mean, but that's the thing is, like, everyone has to vote in a country to, like, you have to have, like, a massive majority to make amendments to a constitution. So the thing is, in some foregone world where a massive number of people from, I'm just going to go, let's say, a massive number of people from the Middle East, for instance, so from Arabic countries like Saudi Arabia, that have somehow fled Saudi Arabia and its persecutions to set up another country that's going to persecute people for the same things, is then going to get a supermajority in a country like the UK and vote in religious punishments that they had in the country that they fled from
Because of religious punishments.
because of religious punishments. It's like, yeah, like, you could make that happen, but it's so incredibly unlikely. And the thing is, what you have is, you have, like, second generation immigrants and things like that, and they're so different.
Yeah.
The thing is, the first generation immigrants might have a lot of ideas from the old country and the things. It's the same as the Americans.
Yeah.
They're used to monarchy, right? And the thing is, it took a few generations for it to change. And the thing is, you might have these people coming over, and they might have some, like, things need to be a bit sterner, things need to be a bit this or a bit that. But then the kids grow up around everyone else, and, like, it just moderates the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
You get a blend.
It's like, it's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible. Like, anything is possible.
Anything is possible.
I mean, clear, this is the whole point, though, about wielding your own reality, though, right? The thing is, if tomorrow morning everyone on the planet decided that, you know, I don't know, we all want to, pee in the ocean and change it to pee. I don't know, I'm just something incredibly insane, right? It's very ridiculous.
I've already contributed to that.
Thank you, Shannon. My dream's becoming a reality. But if you had all 6 billion people in the world wake up with that common idea and then just went and did it, obviously you would change, you know, maybe 0.5% of the world's ocean to urine or something.
Yeah.
But, like, it's a ridiculous example. But the thing is, like, if you took, like, for this idea, for unification, tomorrow morning, everyone wakes up and says, we're going to unify the planet. It's exactly what we want.
Yeah.
Every country would just suddenly be a democracy. Everyone would vote for it, and it would happen. Like, you would have it overnight. Like, it would just happen. So the thing is, perception is so crucial. Yeah.
I was going to say that.
Yeah.
So, based on perception, do you think it must be fear that is stopping us from wanting something like this? Like, fear of history repeating itself in the past with, like, Stalin and whatnot?
Oh, absolutely. I think, like, the thing with Stalin casts a very, very long shadow. I think the thing is, the Americans are getting pumped for... An American culture, like we said the other time, American culture is everyone else's culture. Like, America was so dominant culturally in, like, the 50s and 60s that it has permeated into everything, and whatever happens there is whatever happens everywhere. And the thing is, they were so paranoid, and they put out so much stuff about Stalin and Russia and all that sort of stuff, that it became a big terror. Like, and then the thing is, they got confirmed. That was the thing, is obviously all this propaganda, and they say all this stuff, and then suddenly Stalin turns up and is Stalin and does what Stalin does, and then, like, some insane number of people get killed by him. And it's like, you've end up with this big mishmash thing where it's basically, at its barest level, big government means Stalin.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, like, you have to look at these systems in a more nuanced way, that you have all these different systems going on. Like, predominantly what we have is basically socialist-leaning systems at the moment. We have socialist-leaning systems and liberally-leaning systems, like more free markets and things like that. Like, more or less state control. And the thing is, at one end, we've seen lots of terrible things happen, but also you've seen a lot of positives that have come out of, like, left-wing social control and state control. But at the same time, we don't really focus too much at the same time on the terrible things that have happened on the right side. There's good and bad things at both ends. Like, the thing is, we kind of throw out the baby with the bathwater a lot of the time, where it's like, no, that's, like you're saying, like, that's socialism, that's no, sort of thing. Whereas it's like, you can't look at it that cut and dry, because there's so many layers of things.
And within a system like that, either extreme is probably going to cause some major issues. You need to be a little bit tempered. Yeah,
and everything is. Like, everything, in reality, everything is a tempered version. Apparently, like... so 100% one way, you've got 100% right wing, so absolute liberalness is there is no state anymore and everyone's just doing whatever they want.
Anarchy.
There is anarchy, basically. It's no rules. And then you have opposite, which is the far, far left extreme point, which is where no one has anything. There is one dictator and he is commanding everything, which is basically what Stalin was. And, it's so hard. Like, there are examples of the far right one and it going to absolutely to shit. But the thing is, who do you blame that on? Like, the thing is, there's no ruler at the time. There's probably not even a country. It's just people killing each other. And you can't really call it, you just call it like a war, a conflict or something. Like, that's sort of the problem that they have in the Congo. The thing is, for a long time, the Congo just had this incredibly ineffective government that just didn't have the power to enforce anything. And basically... most of the country just kept killing each other all the time. It was just constant war kind of thing in between the tribes, the Congolese tribes. And so it was just a state that was like a border with nothing in it. And people just killing each other. That is basically what far right ends up looking like, is where people, for survival's sake, start sort of regressing to, like, tribal times.
And then you don't have any leftover energy to, education or create art.
No, exactly.
Any of that, you're just staying alive.
No, exactly. And exactly. I mean, you wake up in the morning, you need to find food, you need to find, like, shelter, water, safety. Like, maybe you've seen some other people around that might kill you or something. All your energy has gone to those things.
So really having some kind of society. I've always thought this when people are trying to promote anarchy. I was like, all right, so if I was in an anarchical country, if I was in that situation, what I would probably do is grab a couple of friends and create a block where we work together and help each other to survive. That's a country.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know that it'll self-correct, but it always seems like anarchy can't be the end point.
No. Exactly. The thing is, and I've thought about it before as well. It's basically, okay, let's say you eradicate everything and you're back to anarchy. You find, like you say, you find a group of friends, you survive together, maybe there's 8 of you or 10 of you. You've functioned together as a group. Some groups maybe you don't get along with, or you're competing for resources. You might fight or something, but then you might find another group that has something and you get along with them, so then you form a bigger group.
Yeah.
You maybe become a 20-person group, and then maybe there's another 20-person group that you find that you don't get along with, so you're afraid of them. So then you find another 40-person group, and now you're 70. And then the thing is, they grow and you grow, and it's like little groups get accumulated and like absorbed, and then suddenly you've got 1,000 people, and you've got 1,000. Oh, okay, it's too many people. We don't know everyone anymore.
Yeah, we can't govern by consensus anymore. We need
exactly.
to have some kind of system of
Exactly.
power and
Yes.
hierarchy.
Because the thing, like, they call it. I forgot what the name was. It was a That's fine. I forgot what it was. It's this thing about monkeys and like how many people they can understand, and like, it's the same with people.
Yeah.
I think it's up to 150.
I think with humans it's about 150. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's about right. A couple hundred.
Yeah, so up to 150, you're able to have a meaningful relationship with that number of people. Like, you remember your high school year. They never rarely go above 150 because it keeps people, in large part, I think it keeps people knowing each other to some degree. I think they use that as a unit of measurement. Like, we shouldn't go above this because that makes sense. That's
you
manageable.
can psychologically keep that as your in-group.
Yeah, like you meet anyone again from high school, and you'll remember them, and you'll have some thoughts about them. You'll have like, I kind of knew who you were friends with, and kind of who you were.
Yeah.
The thing is, like, that you'll remember an impression of them at the very least, and so that's something that you can work off. And the thing is, as you get past that number, we don't know each other anymore. You have anonymity. And the thing is, I think I don't know, this is conjecture, but they think that some of like the ape tribes and things at this point would naturally break apart and form separate groups. But obviously humans, we develop systems to basically get around the fact that we don't know each other. Like judgment methods and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, I guess having more sophisticated, like having language.
Exactly. Yeah.
Conceptual thinking and that kind of thing means that we can set up proxies for society. Because
humans apparently the only animal or something that are able to conceive of something that doesn't exist. So the thing is, we can imagine something that we've never seen. So the point of it is that you develop these systems, and then suddenly you're like a small town with like a basic democracy or something, and then it's the same dynamic. There's another town that you don't like, so you ally with that town because you're afraid of that one, or you do with that one, and it just goes blah 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 blah, out through necessity of survival and fear, until suddenly you have countries again, and then you're back where you started. And we're in the situation we are now, where we're not really. Where the last step, the step to unification, can't be done out of fear, because the thing is, there's nothing to be afraid of without aliens. There's nothing to be afraid of.
Go back to episode 2 if you're interested in that statement.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's very important apparently. But the thing is, that last step has to be done through conscious decision, and that's I guess what this episode is all about. Is that we can't make that final step, that final natural step, because there's nothing else to be afraid of. Yeah. Like, when we do that, we've absorbed all the people we conceive as our enemies. And we're just us. And we don't have anything to hate. And I think that last step is going to be by far the hardest humans 100%. Have ever done. Yeah. And
I think it needs maybe modern technology, maybe a bit more than what we've currently got. And it needs probably new kind of political science, new ways of thinking in that kind of realm as well. And
to be integrated through education.
I think definitely.
It's almost like that programming from the the precondition to going through everything and growing up, and we just have these habits. We just have these habits where we don't even realise that we're habitually thinking a certain way, and we have these fears ingrained in us because we're all so close to just coming out of like the wars and the depressions, post-wars, and all that sort of stuff. That only 2, 3, 4 generations out of that. So
definitely.
Like, think about how quickly things have changed in the last 100 years, 120 years.
Oh, it's been ridiculous.
It's been ridiculous. So.
Yeah. I think that's like I said in the other one. Like, just the distance of travel The thing is, to go somewhere was a massive excursion 100 years ago, like a massive excursion. So, like, you just didn't do it.
Yeah.
You didn't go anywhere. So the thing is, over the course of the last 50 years especially, travel's become really easy.
Yeah.
And now it's like, people just go everywhere. Your grandparents never thought they'd see Europe, so they're going to go see Europe, or whatever it is. Like, that's what happened to mine. And it's like, they never thought they'd go anywhere outside of Australia. And then suddenly, it's this affordable travel. My parents are like, yeah, you can just go now. Why don't you? And they're like, oh, okay. And then they just went and did it, and they thought it was amazing. But, like, it's just out of consciousness. The thing you said about school, it's actually a really good point, because I was thinking this the other day. I mean, how much of an impact does it make on kids and people growing up when you whip out the map, right? And you whip out the map of the world. Two things happen, I think. It sets the boundaries in your head for what the universe is, kind of thing. Like, this is the limit of reality, kind of thing. And at the same time, you see these other countries, and it's like, yeah, we live in this one, where things are like this. And like, oh, what's that one? Oh, that's that country where these things happen. And so it's like, from the very beginning, it's kind of like you're instructed by stereotypes, essentially. There's not the focus on, like, the way that you would talk about Australia and Australians, like, you know a bunch of them. So it's like, oh, my friend's like this, my other friend's like this, I know this person, this is a family friend.
Yeah, so, like, you know the idea that all Melburnians are obsessed with AFL.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's a stereotype, but I personally know that I know heaps of people who don't care about AFL.
Yeah,
So,
well, I don't follow it at all.
So I can, so I can then see through the stereotype because I've got my own experience.
Yeah.
But I don't think I know any, I mean, even let's say French people, so much more likely to fall back on stereotypes.
You mean I'm from Melbourne and I'm in the minority being an AFL supporter?
Probably not the minority.
I just mean in
no, in this room, yes. Apparently you are.
Who would have thought?
No, it's yeah, no, exactly. So the thing is, you don't have this humanized idea of people, and the thing is, it's a point I made a while ago when I was talking to someone. I was on a YouTube video or something, but the thing is, a friend of mine in England was from Iraq, and his whole family was Muslim. And he'd moved to New Zealand and then England, and then we were at high school together in England. And the thing is, I learnt about almost all Muslim religious practices through him. I mean, his family was quite moderate.
Yeah.
It wasn't like extreme practicing, but they were definitely practicing.
I think most people are, sure.
Exactly. No, that's the thing, is like, you don't know about it though, because the thing is, unless someone walks around with the garb or talks about it, I mean, how would you know that they're Muslim?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is so your idea becomes the ones that you've seen, obviously.
Yeah.
Like, that is what it is, rather than the moderate one. And since then, I met a lot more people who are moderate Muslims, but you don't know about it because they don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, through him, I learnt about Ramadan and all the other practices, and it's like, so the whole time I was learning about it, I had this person that I was friends with.
Yeah.
That I had a human idea of it, and then you inject all these practices into it, and that you just see them in the context that you would see a Christian talking about the same thing. Because I had the same thing when I was a kid, and I think it was who was it? I can't remember who it was. It was a Friday. I think it was Jaden. But like, I remember someone I knew was Christian when we were really young.
I'm glad everyone here knows Jaden. Thanks for reminding everyone, Daniel.
It's good. It's famous. But yeah, no, it's just, I know a few people explain to me like Christian religious practices, and it's through the context of the person I knew. And I'd been surrounded by Christians in random places throughout my childhood, and it's like, I kind of had a human being, and then I learnt about the things.
Yeah.
And so you learn them in context.
Yeah.
Whereas I think when a kid is taught about the world, whether it's Muslims or Chinese people or Russians or whatever it is, you get this like caricature in your head, and you start, we couldn't possibly combine with them because they're like that. And it's like, have you ever met anyone from that country?
Yeah.
Or have you just heard about them on the TV? Like, you get this skewed, insane idea of what
almost like a generalized anxiety when you think about it.
You
generalize it a little bit. You're just like, it's just like
preconceived
idea.
Absolutely.
With social media and technology and everything, there's kind of two ways it could go, because obviously you've got this, they provide more of a platform for that vocal minority who are, the extremes, or they're trolls pretending to be those kinds of people and acting in the extreme, that can obviously really kind of make stereotyping worse and add to the problem. But then also, if it's used properly,
Yeah.
it can let you meet real people and
Absolutely, yeah.
have just normal people get their story out. So it's a very double-edged sword, I guess.
Yeah, no, it feeds into what I said the week about the meme culture.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
what everyone does is, to suit their existing preconceptions, they'll pick the craziest, most off-brand thing that some other group has done and turn that into a meme saying, this is what we're dealing with, kind of thing, or something like that. And then the thing is, it's nothing to do with what the mainstream thinks on that side or something. Like, I've seen a lot of shit where it's like, people trying to undercut feminism, essentially, but they're trying to undercut feminism by taking people who basically say men should have nothing and laughing about getting everything in divorces and things like that, and putting them all in compilations and saying women are terrible, what are we doing? Exactly, this is what we're dealing with. And they rebrand feminism with the worst end.
Yeah.
It's something you can't even... It's misandry at that point. It's not actually feminism anymore, because you're basically saying we should be superior.
But then it comes down to who controls the term feminism.
Exactly.
And if you're loud enough, you're the one who controls it.
I guess, no, that's the thing. I guess you can, to an extent, rebrand it by talking loudly enough and often enough. And so... Yeah, but that's part of the internet, right? Is that it's meme culture and simplifying things to extreme imagery and simple one-word answers and things and tweets has turned what is essentially a complicated, nuanced thing with millions of human beings in it into a very simplified message that might only capture one tiny fragment of the overall group. And I think it goes every possible way. But all right, so we've run for a little while.
I have a tangent there, I think.
I just have a couple of things I want to go through. So the fluid nature thing, I have to bring this up because it was like no one expected it to happen. Absolutely no one in the world expected it, because when it started, everyone was just laughing about it. But it's Donald Trump's 2016 victory of the US presidential race. The thing is, when it started, everyone was like, that is hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, the thing is, that is never going to happen. I bet if you'd gone on the betting sites, because I know that they had bets for the US presidential election.
Was it actually on Sportsbet?
It probably, I think it was. And the thing is, I reckon the rate you would have gotten would have been like 300 to 1 or something. And you would have made shit tons if you had bet on him. But no one thought that was ever going to happen. And the thing is, so what was it? So this was an example, right? This is an example of a person making a massive change to a political system using democracy that no one thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
No one thought was possible. But it's because you had this enormous number of people coming out who have never voted before.
Yeah.
Who basically sit in these parts of America where they just completely disillusioned. The factory's gone, the town is virtually empty, the shopping center's shut down. It seems like the world is like ending. It's like their parents tell them about this time when the factory was open and the shops were open and the church was open and all that stuff. All the stuff that was the town all functioned, and all the things that got the money functioned. And now there's like a ghost town with a Walmart, and it's their only option for employment. And these people were just like, this is awful. Like, what are people talking about that things are great, kind of thing. And then when Donald Trump came up and said, because I'm listening to a book about it at the moment, so these demographics. Donald Trump comes up and basically says, the American dream's dead, everything's gone to shit, we need to do all this stuff to get money back in the country. And he's the first person that admitted that the world had gone to shit. And so to these people, it was like the first person they'd ever heard actually acknowledge that things were terrible.
Yeah.
And so he got this massive amount of support from these areas really quickly. And that's what no one expected. So apparently 2.8 million additional white voters came out in 2016 compared to 2012.
Wow.
And it massively threw the number over in these key areas. That's according to the US Census Bureau.
Yeah, that's a decent percentage of their population too, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like
so
2%.
you think about the adult numbers, 2.8 million people that didn't vote in 2016, in 2012, just came out and did it in 2016 suddenly, and a lot of them had never voted before. Everyone else voted against him basically, But like, there's all these Rust Belt states, of which there is always more of them, because a huge percentage of America relied on manufacturing, and those states that have their set number of electoral college votes have all like changed their minds. Even then, like, you look within, they talk about it in the book, that you look within these states, in the cities where there's still employment, there's still jobs, there's still infrastructure and all that sort of stuff, they're voting for any other Republican candidate, or they're voting for the Democrats. There's very, very little Trump support in those places, but then as soon as you break out of the cities to where there's nothing anymore, where there used to be things, it's massive support for Trump, and that's why he took all these states.
Yeah.
Because the cities were voting against him, but all the rural counties, all of them, were voting for him.
And they add up.
Yeah, exactly. And over the course of the entire country, you have this massive thing. So it's like, it proves, it's not exactly the change we wanted, but the thing is, it proves that, and like, if you really want something, you can completely come out of nowhere. Like, if enough people get behind something and vote for something, you can overnight do something that absolutely no one thought was ever going to happen. Because even a week before election day, they still thought he was going to get destroyed by Hillary.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of other stuff going on with the voting and the ads, the Facebook ads.
Oh, so
and
and he's got a lot of resources to work with. So I
there
guess you need the
was,
resources,
absolutely.
but that doesn't change the
But
fact
apparently,
that,
but that's the thing, is at the beginning, before the resources were really employed properly, he was already getting massive support from these areas. And that's where kind of everything grew from, because then once he won the primary, the Republican voters didn't want to change their minds, so the Republican voters just voted Republican, whoever was going to be the Republican option. So it just sort of went from there, but that was what started it. That's why you didn't end up with Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio or whatever it was. I'm trying to speed through my last point as well, because we talked for ages on that first one.
Just to get it out there, I didn't vote for Trump.
I didn't either. We're all in the wrong countries. As much as I wish I could have voted against him, I can't. So the last one is, the last point I had was that the capacity exists to feed everyone in the world, to end poverty, stop global warming, and do all these things, but we don't have the ability, like, we haven't consciously decided to do all this stuff together. So the thing is, it's become this like super ad hoc, working over 10 different systems kind of way of doing it. So the note I have here is, I'll just read it out. The United States spends about 1% of its budget, its national budget, on foreign aid, which is about $45 billion. It's spent about that almost every year since the year 2012, making it $288 billion between 2012 and 2017. And this is from the USAID official website. And that is greater than the annual GDP of Chile or Finland, and almost 150% of New Zealand's GDP. The issue that I'm trying to make is just the inefficiencies of using charities and the charitable system to basically improve these parts of the world. Like, they're funding all these random programs in these different places, but it's kind of like they fund charities and aid agencies that then fund like projects in specific little places. But the problem is that to get the money there and to get the resources there, sometimes you're working in dangerous environments. Sometimes you're doing all these different things. You have to work by the infrastructure that's available. So like, if it's effectively the problem that if you don't fund everything in a country, something about it is going to probably undercut your ability to help something else. So if you don't make sure there's great roads and great railways and electricity to everything and clean water to everything and all the things that a state is meant to do, something else is going to undercut your ability to fix something. It's like, we've brought electricity to your village, but they're like, but our lake has no clean water. So we're all going to leave. It's like you have to fix everything at the same time. This is the problem with the charity model a lot of the time. The charity model is about fixing one thing, usually. It's about, we're going to develop this thing in this area, we're going to build homes. Like that one, like a lot of the time when they send people over and they're there to build homes and things, it's like, we know how to build homes. We don't have the resources to build homes. And a lot of the time, it's more for the catharsis of the foreign students who want to go and feel like they're doing something.
And they're coming from the right place. Like,
exactly.
I don't
they absolutely are.
Say
No,
wrong
they
about
absolutely
the people
are.
who get get tied up in this by the organisations that
Yeah.
it's useless.
Yeah.
Because the American teenagers, they're literally trying to help.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
It's
No.
a little bit kind of colonial and
I don't-
disrespectful, but they're still trying.
No, I don't doubt it for a second. They're absolutely there with the right intentions, and and then it's just that it's so inefficient. Like as a globe, we have spent so much money on developing these things, but then a certain amount is kept by the aid agency, a certain amount is kept just getting through the rules and regulations to get to the other country, a certain amount is spent like navigating that country's internal infrastructure, and then finally you get to the village, and it might be that you missed something on the way, and there's some other problem that undercuts your ability to fix that. It's like, I remember all these stories about like the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, and they turn up in a village, and it's like, yep, we're going to equip you with all these things. Like, we got all these things we're going to give this village, but it's like, yeah, but the fundamental problem is the road is covered with mines, so we can't drive anything up here anyway. And it's like, so you can give us all this, like I don't know. They gave them, like, ways to get water, like these... There was, like, systems to get water, but then they couldn't get get up the roads because they were covered in mines or something. And it's like, it's this specific way of doing things. Like someone in an aid organization has the idea to fix one problem, and they're like, if I fix that one problem, that's going to do good. And absolutely it would. It's just that you've got 10 other problems that undercut your fixing of that one problem. And with a government agency, you can actually plan a development plan and actually fix things completely.
It's almost like if you went and picked up all the rubbish in the world, we all went on a big march, picked up all the rubbish. By the time we picked up the last piece, we'll turn around and all the production of all that rubbish. It's like, the rubbish isn't the problem. We got to address why there's rubbish, why there's pollution, and why there's all that sort of stuff. So we can't just go fix this. The immediate thing. We gotta, we gotta stem back from where the real issue comes from.
No, absolutely. And that's my only point about the charity system. Is we've spent like over the last 10 years, like as you can see, $288 billion from the Americans, just for aid programs, and it's like that's 1% of the GDP, so it's a tiny amount. But the thing is, like, there's so many better ways that could be done to fix these places, like to set them up. But it's a big problem. It's just that that's not the most efficient way to do it. So yeah, look, we've gone for a while. we've kind of gone over, and so we'll.
Somebody likes the sound of their own voice.
I do apparently.
I do too, Daniel. It's a very good voice. Just so everyone knows, he's actually about a metre or further away from the microphone to everyone else.
Thank you. But basically the point we're trying to make from this whole thing is that there's so much that we could potentially do with the world, and so many things we could fix. But the thing is, we haven't willed ourselves into a system, into a thing where we could be able to do it. And the thing is, if tomorrow morning everyone woke up with a new idea and a new decision about how to do things, we could change everything overnight. Like, the world would be completely different if tomorrow everyone just wanted something else. So the point that I'm making between that and the US presidential election and everything else is that if enough people just think that something's a good idea, things start to happen. You're able to do it. And so the thing is, you can't undercut this concept just because it's enormous based on the fact that you think it's too big. Because the thing is, if enough people on Earth start to think it's a good idea, even if you had a few million supporters, you would be able to make content, you'd be able to do all this stuff, you'd grow like exponentially.
And it's a learning process too. Like, I'm sure these inadequate systems, the charities and the just in general, if we can learn from the mistakes, then at least we're progressing towards this system of administration where we can actually organise things properly and put all of the effort to really effective use.
Absolutely.
That would make it more of a fluid structure rather than a rigid one, learning from our mistakes for sure. But I think we're just very too rigid. In our ways definitely. At the moment.
There's going to be a shift in consciousness because of the way the world's changed and the way it's globalized and everything else, and hopefully we can all start moving towards something that's going to be a long-term success and something that will future-proof us. Anyway, we've gone on for quite a while, so thank you very much. That's the end of episode 3, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.